is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. The UK government's scientific advisers call for measures to halt rising COVID cases, including a return to working from home.
Tougher migration rules to stem the flow of refugees tops the agenda at an EU leaders summit in Brussels.
Why Bitcoin is back in the spotlight after cryptocurrencies hit an all-time high this week.
Books are back as Frankfurt's fair returns in person. We'll have chapter and verse on post-pandemic publishing.
And get under the bonnet of renovating old cars.
I'm Nicole Johnston in Wales. And coming up, we'll be finding out about the growing demand for converting classic cars to electric.
UK scientists say the government must get ready to reintroduce COVID measures such as mask wearing to prevent the need for tougher restrictions.
The government has so far refused to implement its so-called Plan B, but daily cases are now running at around 50,000. Let's talk to our correspondent, Ollie Barrett. Ollie, just what are the scientists calling for, and will the government take their advice?
Well, Jamie, one of the things the scientists are saying is that the government needs to be ready to act rapidly, and it says that if the government doesn't act early enough, then even tougher measures will be required further down the line. The sage advice, the scientists advising the government, say that working from home could be one of the most important measures this winter in Britain, which could bring down the spread of COVID-19 in this country to avoid what it calls unacceptable levels of hospitalisation. The scientists also say in their latest report that any messages must be communicated clearly to the public. Now, in the last 24 hours or so, the government's come under a lot of criticism for not being clear enough on its guidance when it comes to the wearing of face coverings in crowded settings. This was a report that was put to the government on October the 14th. Since then, the UK government has made it very clear that at the moment it doesn't plan to move ahead with its Plan B. This report does say, though, that COVID hospital admissions are increasingly unlikely to rise above the levels that we saw in the peak of January 2021.
Ollie, can you give us a little bit of context here? Just how bad is COVID in the UK?
Well, we've had in the last hour the latest figures for the last 24-hour period. There were 49,298 COVID-19 cases reported in the last 24-hour period. That's a bit of a dip from yesterday, but normally more instructive to compare with the same day last week, and that is a jump of several thousand on last Friday. We've also seen 180 COVID-19 deaths reported in the last 24-hour period as well. Hospitalisations ticking up higher. The UK government would say that hospitalisations are much lower than in previous peaks when compared to the case rates we've seen before. They would also say we've got a largely vaccinated population here in the UK, and they would also point to the booster campaign now underway. In the last 24 hours, COVID booster jabs given in England alone, and that is now going to be one of the key focuses of the UK government as it tries to avoid putting tougher measures in place by making sure that more people get their COVID booster jabs who are eligible for one.
Ollie Barrett in London, thank you very much.
Several European Union leaders have called for tougher migration controls, including a border fence to stem the flow of refugees entering the EU. The issue has been top of the agenda as member states gathered for a summit in Brussels. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Giles Gibson. So, Giles, what was discussed today?
Well, at the end of this two-day summit here in Brussels, it appears that European leaders agree on what some of the biggest challenges facing the bloc are, but they don't really agree on what their next steps or what their responses should be when it comes to rising energy prices here in Europe as we head into the winter months, The European Commission is now going to explore joint procurement of natural gas, as well as looking into establishing a strategic gas reserve before the next Council meeting, which is coming up in mid-December. When it comes to migration and this surge in undocumented migrants coming into EU member states in the east of the bloc from Belarus, we've heard from Lithuania's president calling for there to be some sort of a physical fence or a border built along the eastern frontier of the European Union. This was the reaction to that idea from the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen.
There was a discussion on the so-called physical infrastructure, and I was very clear that there is a long-standing comment in the Commission and with the European Parliament that there will be no funding of barbed wire and walls.
And when it comes to the rule of law in Poland, we've heard from the French President Emmanuel Macron saying that they need to see concrete moves from Poland, including restoring the independence of the judiciary in the country.
And Giles, there were tributes for German Chancellor Angela Merkel on her last day.
That's right, Robin. Assuming that German political parties can agree a new governing coalition before the next council meeting comes round in the middle of December, this will be Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor's 107th and final EU summit over the course of her 16 years in office. She got a bit of a tribute from Charles Michel, the President of the European Council, saying that an EU summit without Angela Merkel is like Paris without the Eiffel Tower. She also got a special tribute video sent in by former US President Barack Obama. But despite that sense of a swan song, that this was a bit of a farewell to the German Chancellor, there was also a real sense of her rolling up her sleeves and still getting on with the day-to-day politics. She, very much in this day one of this meeting, called for there to be dialogue and not confrontation when it comes to that standoff between Brussels and Poland.
Giles Gibson, thanks very much.
Trade ministers from the world's leading economies are meeting in London to discuss supply chain problems which have led to shortages around the world. The G7 meeting comes amid fears that the bottlenecks could push up inflation and stifle the post-COVID recovery. The British Trade Secretary says new lorry drivers are being trained, but warned it could be months before these issues are resolved.
We are working, as are many other countries, to find short-term and long-term solutions to ensure that we have the logistics supply chains that we need. Importantly, we've ramped up our training programmes in the UK. We've got 1,000 people a day applying to take up the challenge of being an HGV driver, which is really exciting. I don't suppose they may all pass their tests, but I think we're seeing the opportunity of new careers that people hadn't thought of before.
Shares in troubled property giant Evergrande are up after reports that it has paid a missed interest payment on a bond. The reported $83.5 million payment came just before the deadline on Saturday, which would have forced a default. The world's most indebted property company sparked widespread concern last month when it announced it was having trouble repaying debts totaling $300 billion. Its next major repayment deadline is in a week.
UK retail sales were weaker than expected last month. Despite COVID restrictions easing, sales fell by 0.2% in September. Analysts had been expecting them to rise by 0.5%. Economists say it shows the recovery is running out of steam, while the industry has called for more support from the government ahead of the critical Christmas sales.
Russia's central bank has raised interest rates by 0.75 of a percentage point to 7.5%. It's the 6th hike this year in an effort to tame the country's highest inflation since early 2016. The decision sparked a rally in the ruble.
One of the world's biggest hotel chains, Intercontinental, has reported a 66% rise in third-quarter revenue. The owner of the Holiday Inn and Crowne Plaza brand says steady demand, particularly in the staycation market in both the United States and China, has delivered better than expected. It's more than 6,000 hotels.
French carmaker Renault has posted a 13.4% drop in third-quarter revenue to $10.5 billion. That's on the back of a more than 22% drop in total sales. Renault warned that it expects to produce at least 300,000 fewer vehicles this year because of the global shortage of semiconductor chips.
Diplomats from the United States and Europe are meeting in Paris to try and revive the Iran nuclear deal.
It was signed in 2015, but the United States pulled out in 2018, and Iran has not returned to full compliance. Ross Cullen reports.
The US Special Envoy on Iran, Rob Malley, has been holding talks with his European counterparts here in the French capital on Friday to try to agree how to restart formal discussions with Iran over the terms of the nuclear deal that was signed in 2015. The accord, formerly known as the JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, saw Iran agree to restrictions on its nuclear program in return for the lifting of sanctions. Iran signed up to the deal with the so-called P5+1, the United States, China, Russia, France, Germany and the United Kingdom. But the Trump administration pulled out of the agreement in 2018, and Iran has since been accused of violating some of the deal's limits on uranium enrichment. The United Kingdom, France and Germany are working with China and Russia in efforts to bring Iran and the United States back into compliance with the 2015 deal, but talks have been suspended since the hardline conservative Ebrahim Raisi was elected president of Iran in June. Now, last week, the EU's chief coordinator for the Iran talks flew to Tehran to meet the new administration for the first time since Iran's presidential election in the summer. Iran has yet to announce a date to resume discussions in Vienna, but it has agreed to meet EU officials in Brussels in the coming weeks to discuss the details of the texts that were on the table at the end of the last round of talks in June, which took place in the Austrian capital. Earlier this month, the United States Secretary of State warned that time was running out to return to compliance and return to the benefits of the 2015 agreement. Antony Blinken said Iran has been using this time to advance its nuclear program in various ways. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead.
I would call it a transformation that will transform our brand from combustion into full electric within 9 years. I'm Torsten, I'm the Chief Executive of Rolls-Royce Motor Cars, and you are watching CGTN.
Zero emissions on the road. But what happens when an electric vehicle runs out of charge? The move from combustion engines to electric is accelerating. Rising fuel prices and growing awareness of the climate emergency are driving the change. If the future is electric, are city roadways ready? Is battery technology really greener? And how can car makers put the brakes on costs? Plug in to our EV Special Series, only on CGTN.
Climate change is happening right now. World leaders prepare for vital talks that will change the course of humanity. Action could save millions of lives. Failure could cost many more. Do they have the will to act quickly? Does the planet have the time to wait? Follow full coverage from the COP26 climate talks here on CGTN.
This week on Razor, building highways for bees and the latest mission to Venus.
I see this as my sort of payback and my personal legacy, if you like, that I'm giving something back to the community, but also I think I'm helping to sustain it into the future.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Just a reminder for you that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms. On Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion at CGTN.com and the CGTN app. And in the UK on Freeview.
Now we're talking electric cars, so fasten your seatbelt. Here's Juliet.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Robin. Now, most big companies have signed up to reduce their carbon emissions to net zero by a certain date, and switching their car fleets to EVs can play a big part in that. The energy crisis and that scramble we saw at petrol pumps up and down the country might have made electric cars look
even more appealing. But the upfront cost of paying for one could be putting many off making the switch. Let's run through the potential savings. Now, one of the big benefits is the cost of filling up. Here in the UK, it's estimated that it will cost around $4.35 to get you around 100 kilometres. Now, that's compared to around $10.30 in a petrol car. Big difference. Incentives are another benefit, and they include exemptions from charges for driving in city centres. Like here in London, electric vehicle owners don't have to pay the congestion or ultra-low emissions zone charges. Some cities also offer free parking for EVs. And then there are tax breaks for buying electrical vehicles. But what about that purchase price? See, EVs are getting less expensive. But look, in April, the average price in the United States was around $51,000. And you can see, look, that's nearly 25% more than you pay for a petrol-powered car. Now, experts say that owning an electric vehicle is going to cost you less in the long run if you can afford the higher price tag. Now, one country looking to become a major player in the world of electric vehicles is here in the UK. And a new partnership involving Japanese car giant Nissan and Shanghai-based Envision Group will boost local EV production, boost global export and jobs. Louis Jabarkil went to Envision's plant in Sunderland to get a glimpse of its wafer-thin battery, which could revolutionise the industry.
Around 9 in 10 cars made at this Nissan plant still rely on fuel, but that's quickly set to change. There's a new type of vehicle the Japanese car giant is building more of here in Sunderland, electric ones.
The direction in Europe from governments, from regional authorities and from cities is towards electric vehicles. So I fully expect that within 10 years everything that we produce here and everything that we sell will be an electric vehicle.
Central to that plan is a new $1.4 billion hub being built here for EVs. Dubbed the world first, it will have 3 parts to it. Around half the money will come from Nissan to build a new electric car. A similar investment is being put in by a subsidiary of Shanghai-based Envision Group to provide the all-important batteries. And the local council is providing almost 10% of funding to set up a renewable energy microgrid to power the site. When the move was announced in July, Prime Minister Boris Johnson came here to unveil it.
This project's also being backed by the UK government as it prepares to host the COP26 climate summit in November. It's keen to show off its green credentials. But it could be transformational for this area too. Around 70,000 jobs here in the northeast of England rely on the supply chain linked to this plant. In recent years, there have been some job losses, partly because of COVID-19 and Brexit uncertainty. But this new push to electric could help power the local economy here for years to come.
If the mass transition to EVs is to really happen, batteries could be the key. In a rare look inside Envision's plant in Sunderland, we got a first-hand glimpse of what's becoming a prized possession for global car makers. They may look modest, but these thin sheets of metal which go into the batteries could revolutionise transport for billions of us. And for the firms involved, business is heading in one direction.
Envision AC already has plants in Japan, US, China and the UK. We have announced 3 new plants with Nissan in UK and Japan and with Renault in France. And we expect this growth to continue globally as the world transitions to EVs.
The new hub in Sunderland is still a few years away, but the wider sector here does face the usual challenges, from a global shortage of semiconductors to a lack of charging infrastructure and the high cost of EVs.
I think that's part of the strategy, is trying to get supplier base around us locally. It reduces our logistics costs, and of course it's better from a carbon neutrality point of view as well.
Official figures predict 40,000 jobs could be created by the UK's EV industry by 2030. If the country is to become a global hub, what's happening here on the northeast coast could be crucial for that journey. Louis Jabarkil, CGTN, Sunderland.
There's so much exciting stuff going on, isn't there? Well, electrification isn't just the domain of new, modern cars. Much-loved classics like an old Beetle or a 1960s Ferrari are being given a new lease of life. Nicole Johnston discovered that fusing the old with cutting-edge science is a fun ride.
This Fiat 500 is cute as a button. Owner, British actor Dev Patel from the film Slumdog Millionaire has left it at a workshop in Wales to be transformed. It's going electric, and it's not the only one.
So what we have here is kind of the waiting room, if you like. It's the start of the journey for most of the vehicles. This is a Ferrari Testarossa, which still has its dirty, smelly stuff in. So we've still got the engine, fuel tank, gearbox and everything.
Richard Morgan and his team of mechanics and engineers convert classic cars to electric. He's in so much demand that there's a 2-year-long waiting list to take these vehicles into the future.
I converted my first car about 5 years ago, and I did that purely as a kind of hobby, really, to keep my own classic cars alive and use them as daily drivers. And what happened was I put that process online on YouTube, and people started to follow that process. And even before I'd finished my own car, I had somebody wanting me to convert their car next. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And here we are 5 years later, and we're the largest converter of classic cars in the world.
So what's the process?
So we're going to drop out all the dirty, smelly stuff, the engine, the gearbox, the fuel tank, exhaust, everything's going to drop out.
Then work out how many electric batteries can fit under the bonnet. And in the boot.
So this is a 150-mile range, and the only thing that gives the game away on the outside, tells you that it's electric, is we changed the Austin Cooper S to a lightning strike, and that's it. I like little subtle things like that.
Exactly. Very classy.
And the fuel filler cap now is where the charger is.
Now for the real test, going for a drive in a classic British Land Rover Defender owned by Richard.
Diesel Land Rovers are often known for being clunky to drive, oily and smelly. But this one with an electric motor, you can hear how quiet it is. There's no gear stick, it's just one button to start. And according to Richard, it's also far more reliable.
They're maintenance free, so you tend to enjoy the journey a lot more because you're not stressing about whether or not it's going to break down. And the other thing is you can keep up with modern traffic because they're a lot more powerful.
Richard makes the conversion sound straightforward, but every car is different. Some require a complete refurbishment. Others need power steering converted to electric or electric heating installed, all while the battery weight is perfectly distributed. You can also order an electric car converter kit and have it shipped abroad. But it's not cheap. The conversion to electric can cost between $30,000 and up to $120,000. But when you're out on the road in Wales, that cost fades into the background.
One thing that I'm passionate about is classic cars, and enabling them to be enjoyed into the 21st century is what gets me out of bed in the morning, if you like.
If we could all drive an electric classic car to work, we'd be out of bed fast too. Nicole Johnston, CGTN, Wales.
Well, one reason why you might do that is because the super luxury segment of the car market is yet to fully embrace EVs. Although Rolls-Royce says its first electric car, Spectre, will be on the road from 2023. The British firm has pledged to then build only electric vehicles from 2030 onwards. CEO Torsten Müller-Odfors expects a smooth ride.
I think that long-term the future is electric because we see clients asking for it. So emission-free motoring, to call it like that. Number two is that we see lots of, let's say, legal action worldwide, let's call it like that, which prevent in future combustion engines to enter cities. But that's not the only reason. It's also that particularly our younger clients are quite interested in it and would like to see an electric Rolls-Royce. So I'm convinced that this is the right way forward for our brand. Brilliant for our brand and for our cars. And we are not defining ourselves with roaring engines and loud exhaust noises. So it's perfect.
What benefits do you think Rolls-Royce has over other
electric vehicle manufacturers?
We are part of the BMW Group, and this is a substantial benefit. We have access to all the technology. You might be aware that the BMW Group is also investigating hydrogen and fuel cells, but our basic route is electric, that's for sure. And I think this is a big advantage that we have access to all that technology. Many smaller manufacturers in the super luxury segment don't have that access. And it is costly. It is for us, I would call it a transformation, that we transform our brand from combustion into full electric within 9 years. And that is also, of course, lots of investments. I'm proud that we were able to build the brand up to levels where we are today. We are very profitable. We are running on full steam. We are selling this year around 5,000 cars, and we are earning all the money we need also for the future to invest into further electrification for our portfolio.
So the numbers make sense for Rolls-Royce and for EV manufacturers, but let's talk a little bit about the consumer, because affordability has been an issue for EVs. That's possibly not on your radar at Rolls-Royce, but how important is it, though, that future technologies are within reach of ordinary consumers?
I mean, that's a global question, basically, and I mean, definitely nothing in my position being responsible for Rolls-Royce is, I would say, important in a way, because our clients can afford our cars. They understand that, and they have reached this level, fortunately. But I'm with you, and I think when you look into what happens in the automotive industry, then there is definitely a strive that the electrification needs to bring costs down also over time to make motoring available for many, many people worldwide, because daily commuting, daily motoring is for many, many people an extremely important factor in life. And for that reason, I think the automotive industry will do everything to make that possible. Make no error, I'm convinced.
Well, alas, it's time to park our power-driven special series. If you missed anything, you can see all of our electric vehicle coverage at europe.cgtn.com. Robin and Jamie, I'm riding back to you.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks very much, Juliet. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, all eyes turn to China as Beijing prepares to host the Winter Olympic Games.
It's the first day in Germany that vaccination centers like this one are offering a third jab.
There are fears there could be a fifth wave of COVID-19 cases.
Market watchers have a keen eye on infection rates,
safety and efficacy of COVID-19 shots. France closed schools in the first lockdown in spring last year. France has been a leader in vaccinating youngsters.
If a spike necessitates another lockdown,
Italy is now close to reaching its target of immunising 80% of the population over the age of 12.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. UK government scientific advisors call for measures to halt rising coronavirus cases, including a return to working from home.
And the EU chief says there's no funding for barbed wire or walls as leaders discuss migration control at a summit in Brussels. China has urged the United States to be cautious after President Joe Biden said Washington would defend the island of Taiwan from attacks by Beijing.
Biden's remarks are at odds with a long-held US policy known as strategic ambiguity, where Washington helps build Taiwan's defenses but has not explicitly promised to come to the island's help. However, a White House spokesman later said Joe Biden's remarks did not signify a change in policy. China's foreign ministry warned the United States against interference.
On issues concerning China's core interests, China has no room for compromise. No one should underestimate the Chinese people's determination and strong ability to defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. We urge the U.S. to strictly abide by the One China principle and the 3 Sino-U.S. joint communiques, be cautious with its words and actions on the Taiwan issue, and not to send any wrong signals to the separatist forces in Taiwan, so as not to seriously damage our relations and peace and stability in the region.
The World Trade Organization has concluded its latest review of China's trade policies 20 years after China joined.
While some member states praised China's role in driving global economic growth and opening up its economy, others, including the United States, were critical, accusing China of unfair trade practices and calling for more reforms. Liu Jiaoqin reports.
Today is the last day of the World Trade Organization's 8th trade policy review of China. Some WTO members say that China has not taken the anticipated steps to transform its state-led, non-market approach to the trade and the economy, including industrial policies, and create systematic problems for global trade and a severe and persistent excess capacity. But looking back over the 20 years since China's accession to the WTO, these members noted that China and its economy had greatly benefited from China's WTO membership. China's Minister of Commerce elaborated on China's new development philosophy during the 8th review, responded to the country's new reform and opening up measures, and responded to the concerns raised by the WTO members. First, China offers the broad market for the world. China is the major trading partner for over 120 economies, and since 2008 has been the largest export market for the least developed countries in general. In 2020, China's imports goods totaled $2.1 trillion. U.S. companies operating in China reaped as much as $630 billion of sales revenue in 2019. In 2020, large foreign invested industries companies yield $1.8 trillion of profits, up by 7% year-on-year, outpacing the national average by 2.9 percentage points. China firmly supports the WTO-centered multilateral trading system and promotes mutual, beneficial, and win-win outcomes of higher quality. China welcomes all countries to share development opportunities with it and is willing to work with all parties to jointly safeguard the multilateral trading system with WTO as the core.
Liu Jiaoqin reporting from Beijing.
The United States has dropped its threat of trade tariffs against 5 European countries over their digital taxes for big tech groups. It's all part of a deal to manage the transition towards a new global tax for large corporations. Well, let's talk to our correspondent John Terrett in New York, who's watching the story for us. John, well, a victory for common sense, so it seems.
Yeah, I would put it that way, Jamie and Robin, quite frankly. I mean, DC usually wins in the end, you know. Probably don't want to hear that if you're sitting in a European capital, but you know it's probably true. They've certainly got most of what they wanted. The story here is that in 5 European capitals, and I'll name them for you, Austria, Britain, France, Italy, and Spain, this digital services tax has been seen as something very vital to prop up public services. But DC sees it very differently. DC sees it as an attack on the likes of Google and Microsoft and indeed Facebook. And I've told you before on this program, it's all part of that thing that goes on between Washington and European capitals when Washington says, well, how many Facebooks and Microsofts and Googles have you actually produced then, Europe? Oh, that would be none. Right, well, let's just bear that in mind, shall we? So Washington had threatened to levy taxes or, sanctions or tariffs, whatever you want to do, in retaliation if this digital services tax had come in or had gone on much longer than it already is. But now they have reached an agreement. And you're quite right to say the agreement is all wrapped up with this global corporation tax, because the agreement is, as far as I can understand it, that the digital services tax is going to be maintained through 2023, which is when I think they hope this global corporation tax will come in, and there'll be all sorts of balances. So if a company overpays in tax, then it will come off its bill at the other end and all of that kind of stuff. And so it's really a face-saving deal. All sides here can claim that they got something out of it and that they didn't really lose any face. My understanding is that India and Turkey still plan to go ahead with this digital services tax, so they could still find themselves hit with levies, possible tariffs in the future. But I have to point out, finally and quickly, that this whole notion of a global corporation tax, which would be raised, I think, from where it is now around 10%, well, I think it's different in every country, isn't it? But it would be a minimum of 15%. And they agreed this at the OECD the other day. But it hasn't been signed into law, it hasn't been signed off here in the Congress yet. And you know how leery they are about raising taxes in America generally. But I think it will go through, because I think Janet Yellen has said, Treasury Secretary, she wants it to go through. She thinks it'll go through. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to fold it in to the infrastructure bill and the Build Better bill, which is working its way through the House and the Senate at the moment. I think it'll be in there. So it's likely to be something that the people in Congress don't even notice, really. But they'll vote for the infrastructure stuff that they want, in theory. So it will go through. So, that's where we're at the moment. Face-saving deal. Look for it to be included in the big Build Back Better bill.
John, you'd have thought then that would boost some of these companies, but social media platforms are absolutely tanking.
I know. Well, this is a very interesting story. I was down there on the floor. We often can't get down there until later in the afternoon. I was down there yesterday at about 4 o'clock local time doing the hit for the the Washington program. And all of a sudden, Snap Inc., which is the company, it's a camera company, really, but we know them because they have a very young audience. They appeal to young people, and they're also those people that come up with those filters so you can turn your face into a panda or something, whatever you want to do, something like that. And they're a very interesting company, and they gave us a huge, huge profits warning for the fourth quarter, which we're now in. And their shares were down by 30%. A third of their value gone, just like that. That's absolutely extraordinary. And they are now down around 25%, so it's maintaining today. They blame supply chain issues, which, frankly, I don't really understand why they would say them anyway, whatever. But the big issue is that they're blaming the Apple iOS privacy changes, the operating system for the iPhone. Now, we covered this on our program back in April. I remember you calling me up and saying, let's do this, and we did it. And now this is the effect. Basically, what happens is, if you've got an iPhone with a 14.5 operating system, you can turn off the ability of advertisers to track you. And 80% apparently have done. Now, just very briefly, in the old days, a company would buy advertising on, say, ITV or TFR or here, NBC, and then the business would go up, they'd have a big party at Christmas time, go home for Christmas and the New Year, and then come back next year and start all over again. Online advertising works and is so successful because they can track you. And now here's Apple allowing 80% of people who have this system to turn off the tracking. So that is why these companies that rely on advertising have been tanking in the last 24 hours or so. And I think Google, which produces Android smartphones as well, I think it's thinking of doing almost exactly the same thing. So Facebook is down 6% now. Snap is down 25% this minute here. And Twitter is down 5%. So I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see what happens, because these are all very important, very fascinating, interesting companies. But this move towards, helping people control their privacy appears to be denting the possibility for advertising. So we'll just have to see.
John, we have to turn off your tracking. We're out of time. John Terrett in New York, thank you very much.
Investors in cryptocurrency are keeping a keen watch on the market after the Nasdaq launch a few hours ago of a new Bitcoin futures fund. Bitcoin itself hit a record high of more than $66,000 on Wednesday, with hopes that the listing of the Valkyrie exchange-traded fund will attract a host of new investors. Well, let's talk now to Jeffrey Tucker, who's president of the Brownstone Institute, which follows the crypto sector closely. Good to have you with us on the programme, Jeffrey. Thanks for joining us. So we've seen Bitcoin hit an all-time high this week, taking other cryptocurrencies with it. Is this a bubble that's never going to burst?
It will burst. It always bursts. That's the way these markets work. They go way up, a tremendous amount of exuberance, and up and up and up, and then there's a fallback below the previous high, and then it crawls up and crawls up and crawls up. And it's been the pattern for 10 years. So yeah, we're going to see some pullback in this sector here. I would say pretty soon, actually. But I do think it's a significant move in the sense that it does reflect a wild optimism for the ETFs that are being approved. And it's going to be 1, then 2, then 5, then 10, then 20. And the U.S. regulators have shown themselves willing to tolerate this kind of investments, which is a bit of a shock, actually. I'm not sure anybody was really anticipating this. And there's also a great and growing interest in Bitcoin as a safe haven asset during really bad economic times. We've got supply chain breakages, ports clogged, inflation pushing all over the place, labor shortages. Things are really looking bad in the U.S. right now and in many places of the world. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies have not broken. They haven't shut down. They've performed very well over the last 20 months, and people are starting to notice.
So is all of this a sign that cryptocurrencies are really now mainstream?
You know, that's an interesting question. I've seen ever fewer claims that this is actually a Ponzi scheme or that the natural value of Bitcoin is zero, that this stuff is useless, and so on and so on. When you have central bankers out there saying, oh, we're going to have our own cryptocurrency. Oh, these stable coins are a good idea, but we need to regulate them and maybe take them over. It's a funny way in which governments and central banks themselves have conferred a kind of legitimacy on the crypto sector that it previously had lacked. I mean, let's face it, these assets are difficult to understand. And they've been under a cloud for the better part of their whole existence. That cloud does seem to be, I would say, like dissipating. I don't think it's entirely gone yet, but it's getting closer and closer. I mean, 2 years ago, fancy finance people were still making fun of me for my interest in this sector. And I'm hearing ever less of that now these days. No apologies yet, but a little less teasing than I used to get.
Well, I wanted to pick up on what you said. You said you thought a crash might be coming sooner than some people expected. This volatility problem hasn't gone away, though, has it?
No. And here's what's funny. People do not want it to go away. We need to understand that. The volatility is one of the appeals. This is why regular people like to be in these markets. They like the risk. They like the daring do that's associated with buying and randomly assuming it's going to go up and up and up and feeling good about their decisions and then waking up in the morning and discovering they've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars and crying about that. So it's all part of the fun and games of the sector, and it always has been. This is why these, you wake up one morning and there's some weird token you've never heard of is up 400%. People like that kind of volatility. If you want stability, there's stable coins out there that allow you to do very fast transactions across borders, much better than any other system, wire transfers and blah, blah, blah. That's a great system. Mostly those stable coins are used now by exchanges and individuals, but once the stable coins can be available for large businesses and non-profits and that sort of thing, they're going to grow and grow and grow. So if you want stability, there's stable coins, but nobody wants stability in these other tokens. They want volatility so they can play the markets and have some fun.
Fun indeed. Jeffrey Tucker from the Brownstone Institute. Great to have you with us on the programme today. Thank you.
Always my pleasure.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, a carpet expected to sell for millions. a relic from Imperial China.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. After going almost fully digital in 2020 due to coronavirus, the world-famous Frankfurt Book Fair has returned to Germany. Literature from around the world is on display, and some of the biggest names in publishing are taking part. Well, our correspondent Ryan Thompson has been browsing the bookshelves for us. So, Ryan, what's going on this year?
Hi there, Robin. Well, I can't tell you how happy I am. I'm a true book lover, and it's great to be back. It's a little bit quiet now because everyone has gone home. The book lovers are out to dinner and maybe tucking in for the night with a nice novel. But it has been an exciting but jam-packed day because all types of literature has been displayed. And the amazing thing about this book festival is it's not your mother's book festival. This is the world's largest. It brings together all types of books from around the world. Take a look.
While stuck at home with nowhere to go, many of us turn to books for comfort, distraction, and escape during the worst months of the pandemic. As a result, print book sales had their best year in a decade, and the boost has re-energized a previously uneasy publishing industry. Robust sales has proved a boost for authors, editors, and booksellers who are meeting face-to-face for the world's largest book fair in Frankfurt this week after a COVID pause.
It's wonderful. Yeah. After such a long time, we were really eager to come here. And a lot of people said that it's going to be a ghost fair, that nobody will come, but our experience until now is very good.
Turnout is down significantly compared to previous years. 250,000 attendees has become well below 20,000. And the star-studded list of authors has been slashed, with some of the biggest names now only appearing here via video link.
But that hasn't stopped people from as far away as the Philippines from showing up. Countries from around the world are in attendance, with books published in dozens of languages. Chinese authors have nearly 1,500 works on display, with many of them written for children. This year's main spotlight is on Canada, which has put its national conversation on diversity front and center. Books on race and social issues have been some of the best-selling in recent years, and literature from Indigenous groups is also being showcased.
So we're talking about one big country and a lot of things happening in that country. And Canada Night showed our Indigenous history as well, which was, I think, really important with reconciliation that's happening in our country. And we have a lot of fantastic authors that we're just not about moose and polar bears, that we have a real history and we have lots of stories to share with the world.
2020's virtual version of the book fair largely failed to elicit the same special feeling from book lovers. Attendees say there's something special about browsing shelves and feeling the pages with your fingers, which makes all the difference. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
So great to have that event back in person, but there has been some controversy over a German publisher, hasn't there?
That's right, Robin. There's this whole free speech question because the controversy really bases around this right-wing publisher who's at the center of it. Some and his critics say he propagates Nazi ideas by taking this right-wing agenda that is blatantly anti-refugee, pro-nationalist. And just to give you an idea, this publisher has been banned from Twitter, from Facebook, from YouTube, a number of social networks. He's actually under watch by Germany's Interior Intelligence Service. His presence here at the book fair has pushed some within Germany's author community to actually cancel their appearances, cancel their presence at this renewed book fair. Many of them saying it's just not the same stage that they want to be sharing, but the book fair itself says technically this author is not breaking any laws. He's done nothing wrong. He has the right to say what he wants to say, even if it is morally wrong. Robin.
Ryan Thompson in Frankfurt, thank you.
Beijing is staging a series of test events ahead of hosting the Winter Olympics.
The plan is to provide a taste of what the Games will look like and the COVID control measures that will be in place. Sui Huiao reports.
This is the Capital Indoor Stadium, and this week a test event is being held here with skaters from around the world battling it out for Olympic places. But with the pandemic still raging globally, how do organizers ensure that those who are competing and helping to run the Games remain safe and well? Through what is called a closed-loop management system, essentially athletes are insulated from spectators in the outside world for the entire competition. Once inside the stadium, they can move between rest areas and the competition venue. For volunteers, only those in a closed loop can approach athletes, handing them masks and the other medical gear they need. What about reporters? Well, to come here, I have to prove I tested negative in the previous 24 hours. I also have to wear an N95 mask, which is a higher spec alternative to surgical masks, and I can only interview athletes via video. There are other strict rules for the test event. For instance, everyone in the closed loop has to take a virus test every day. And for athletes and staff members, their health condition has been monitored in 14 days prior to the test event. Well, there are large signs here that remind everyone to maintain social distancing, wash hands, and refrain from eating, which is all crucial under the pandemic. Organizers are making full use of modern technology to ensure everyone's safety.
A simple scan of a QR code, the screen will display all your health information, including your body temperature, travel history, nucleic acid test results, inoculation, among others.
With all that info, the system can be used to track people, which is important if someone catches the virus. And it's not all done. Everyday tests will be run in 10 locations of the venue on aerosol concentration. The test event offers organizers a chance to fine-tune preparations for the real thing, Beijing 2022, which starts in early February. Cui Huiao, CGTN, Beijing.
Europe.cgtn.com has all the week's top stories from China. Here's a quick take.
All that and more at europe.cgtn.com. Millions of people in France are to receive a €100 subsidy to help pay for rising fuel costs. 38 million people who earn less than €2,000 a month are eligible. The French government has also announced that household gas prices will be capped until the end of next year.
Hundreds of young people have taken to the streets of Berlin to demand Germany's new government bring in laws to tackle climate change. After the election last month, the Social Democrats, the Liberals and the Greens are expected to form a coalition in the coming weeks. Climate change was a big issue during the campaign, and all three parties have pledged to take a strong stance on it.
At least 16 people have been killed in an explosion at a Russian gunpowder and chemical factory. It happened at the Ryazan region, about 300 kilometers southeast of Moscow. More than 170 emergency workers were sent to the incident. Russia's emergency ministry says it believes the explosion was caused by lax safety measures.
American actor Alec Baldwin has been questioned by police after firing a prop gun on a film set which killed a cinematographer. Helena Hutchins was flown to hospital but died of her injuries. The film's director was also injured. He has since been released from hospital. Police say they are investigating and no charges have been filed.
A rare carpet which once hung in the Imperial Palace in Beijing's Forbidden City is expected to fetch at least $4 million when it goes up for auction next month in Paris. It's due to go on display at Christie's in London this week.
We are very fortunate to have this Imperial Ming dragon throne carpet, which was woven in the 16th century and would have originally been in the Forbidden City. We see two 5-clawed dragons writhing above the foaming seas, which represent the earth. They are confronting a flaming seed pearl, which symbolises longevity, prosperity, wealth, everything everyone wants, really. And above that would have been positioned the emperor's throne. We are dating this to the 16th century, to the Ming period, and we know that because it ties in very cleanly and clearly with the group of carpets that were woven by the Imperial Beijing workshops, starting in the 15th century right through to the middle of the 17th century. In terms of provenance, this carpet, we know that it was bought in 1920 by Mr. and Mrs. Moore, who were originally from Cincinnati. They were travelling to China on their honeymoon. They were a particularly wealthy couple. Apparently they bought 3 carpets at that time. But in 1987, it was sold through an auction house in Boston and has remained in the same private Swiss collection since 1987. This is exceptionally rare for anyone who is interested in masterpiece-level works of art. It's an extraordinary piece to add to a collection. It's absolutely something that would be ideal for an institution, and so therefore I would expect anyone who has the capacity to see some competitive bidding, but it would be lovely if it did return back to China mainland.
And finally, if you've got a head for heights, then this is for you. The Dubai Eye, the world's largest and highest Ferris wheel, is now open. It's 250 metres tall and can carry 1,750 people in one rotation, which takes around half an hour.
The opening coincides with the postponed Expo 2020 World Fair, which launched earlier this month. Tourism bosses hope it'll help attract thousands of visitors. The headlines again. The UK government's scientific advisers called for measures to halt rising coronavirus cases, including a return to working from home.
And the EU chief says there's no funding for barbed wire or walls as leaders discuss migration control at a summit in Brussels.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching. More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again on Monday, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.